If everyone would please take their seats, we'll get started in 2 minutes. If everyone could please take their seats, we'll get started in 2 minutes. Thank you very much. We're up to 2 bow ties. We need a couple more. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the November meeting of the Metropolitan Transportation Authority Board. Let's begin with public speakers. Mr. Morello, do we have any public speakers?
We do, sir. We have 3 speakers. As usual, we would ask that our speakers try to contain their comments to our 2-minute allotted time. That way we can treat everyone fairly. The first speaker is Pedro Valdez. He'll be followed by Frederick Wells.
Good morning, Chairman Paragas, MTA Board, staff. My name is Pedro Valdez Rivera Jr., and I'm a private citizen from Bedford-Stuyvesant. Today we'll talk about the train arrival times for the B division, or the mainly B division stations, or countdown clocks for the general public. It's the great first step. It's a great cost-effective way to find out when the next train arrives, because the people in the B division stations who take the B division stations desperately need when the next train arrives, just like the ones on the A division on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the 42nd Street shuttle, and the L train as well. And the reason why we focus on putting those countdown clocks as quickly as possible by the first quarter of 2018 is because it's the first step for modernizing the system, the entire subway system for decades to come, especially through communications-based train control, like you see on the L, and do the same thing by the end of next year for the 7. The 7 will get their countdown clocks as well. But by the end, I applaud the MTA, especially with the countdown clocks. It's long overdue, and we'll keep your word. We promise the public keep your word for years to come. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mr. Valdez. Frederick Wells, and he'll be followed by Jonathan Bove.
Good morning. This is Frederick Wells. I'm going to talk about mostly buses, the L train alternative, and the subway. Okay, regarding the L train alternative, it's like you really need to increase the bus services around the L line, and add more increase bus service. The B39 really needs to be extended on the west end to, like, say, Union Square, on the east end to, say, Flushing Avenue. You need to become a SBS. Along like this, and just because the L runs 14th Street doesn't mean you have to have a SBS coming from Brooklyn from 14th. You could put a no SBS on 34th Street from Penn Station to, say, Nassau Boulevard and Greenpoint. You know, as to bring people a new alternative. Plus, increase bus service on the B60, the Q54, Q59, as well as and the B20, B83, as well as other bus lines around the L. Also, we need to push to bring the new Tri-Borough RX line. I know it's one track spanning Brooklyn to the Bronx via Queens. You know, we need to push to have the Tri-Borough RX line. Need to push to put SBS on the Q52 and 53, along with the Rockaway Beach Rail line, Queens Rail, they want to call it. And I will also push to establish a new try to build a new subway line directly linking the Bronx and Jamaica, similar parallel to the Q44 route, but like traveling Casino and Parsons, because that's where the high-density residential areas are. That's it. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Mr. Wells. Finally, Jonathan Bove.
Good morning, the board. Good morning, the visitors. Ironically, I prepared the speech for Monday, but I was not able to make it because of the subway issue. And Mr. Borden spoke up on Finance Committee and suggested to have public speakers appear after the board meets. And I would like to thank Mr. Borden Murray for that. Regarding the subways, I would like to support with my both hands the increasing of LA train during next summer. I wish it could happen earlier than that. But that's what we have right now. Currently, we have subway system that, according to the agenda of the transit, is almost 34% trains do not operate on time. In other words, it's almost 2 million people who are either late to work or to homes. And I ran into the person who actually was fired because of that. September ridership is, Sunday weekend ridership is decreasing. Also, subway statistics shows that almost 56,000 trains were delayed during the month of September. Many buses operate, as you know, on very low speed, and bus ridership is continuously decreasing. If we take no action right now, we will still see the trains and buses demand that is not satisfied. People will choose Ubers and bikes to use instead, and it will not. I'm sorry. And which will not satisfy the mass transit. So right now, reforming the train routes will create a possibility to resolve the delays related to the right-of-way and track sharing, causing almost 8,000 delays every month. These new roads will create a possibility to reduce overcrowding, which cause more than 20,000 delays each month, by adding more trains and minimizing the train delays to 2-3 minutes gaps. Facilitating, maintaining, and developing the timetable which maintain these 2-3 minutes gaps during rush hours will create a possibility and reliability for the subway services. Developing a policy that will address the issues, developing the policies and procedures that instantly resolve delays related to policy activity, sick and unruly passengers. Equipment maintenance will create a possibility for further reduce train delays up to 90%. And finally, I'm sorry taking too much time, 2 miles corridors with 100% right-of-way, which are used by multiple bus routes, will create a possibility to increase bus ridership across the city. These corridors would create a possibility for reliable, fast, and accurate subway service, especially in the subway deserts. This great city deserves great public transit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bove. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. I think you all know that we had a tragic accident in our subway system about 2 weeks ago. 2 MTA conductors, Louis T. Gray Jr. and Jeffrey Fleming, were hit by a train as they were working on the tracks in Brooklyn. Mr. Fleming was injured and Mr. Gray was killed. Everyone at the MTA is devastated by this news, and I want to express my deepest condolences to Louis Gray's wife, Mary Abdul Latif, his sons, Louis T. Gray III, Yusuf Abdul Latif, and Claude Desir Thomas, his 2 grandchildren, Tierra Thomas and Jazir Thomas, and his sister, Linda Gray Peters, and to all of his friends, many of which who are fellow employees at New York City Transit. The incident serves as a stark reminder to the dangers our employees experience on a daily basis working in the subway. It reminds us of our frontline employees and their incredible contribution they make to operating the system, and that these workers are nothing less than heroes for putting their lives on the line every time they show up for work and serve our region. It's also a stark reminder that safety is the most important job and responsibility we have here. Yes, we have to move trains. Yes, we have to maintain equipment. But we have to assure the safety of our customers and our employees. And I know I speak for everyone here at the MTA family in wishing Mr. Fleming's a speedy recovery from his injuries. And now I'd like to ask for a moment of silence in honor of New York City Transit conductor Louis T. Gray, Jr. Thank you. Toward the end of our meeting today, our Chief Financial Officer, Bob Ferran, will give a presentation, as he does every year in November, on the next four-year financial plan. I'll leave most of the details to Bob, but I do want to say how pleased I am that we will be keeping a promise that we made to our customers to minimize our fare and toll increases. And more specifically, a promise we made to do everything we can to keep those increases to 4% every 2 years, or 2% a year. Now, some people think that most of our cost-cutting game came in 2010 when it began. But when those days were long over, we continued to cut costs out of this organization. And I think that's partially because we need to do a better job of promoting those efforts and continually communicating to the public that we serve that we're taking cost out of this organization and keeping their fares and tolls as low as possible. Just take a look at the plan. You'll see that our belt-tightening days are far from over. In fact, the most aggressive cost-cutting in our history continues to this day, just as aggressively as it was started with Jay Walder and continued through Joe Lota. Thanks to these efforts, we will meet or exceed the 2016 target of taking $1.6 billion out of the cost of this organization on an annual basis. And these are recurring savings. With the projected savings targets in the plan, we expect to get to that number to almost $2 billion a year by 2020. That's $2 billion a year more every year that we can use to add or improve service, keep fares and tolls low, or make improvements to the level and quality of service that we provide. The minutes of the October's meeting have been distributed to all members. Are there any corrections or omissions? If not, may I have a motion to approve the minutes? Second? All in favor? Aye. Committee on Finance. The first report on finance is from Mr. Freddie Ferrer.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee met on Monday and reports the following. There is one action item for board approval. The action item requests board approval to add the law firm of Loeb & Loeb to the panel of board-approved outside counsel. The committee recommends this action item, and I move it.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye. There are 3 procurement items this month in a total amount of $675,000. There are no non-competitive procurements. There are 3 competitive procurements in the amount of $675,000. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second. Comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye. There are no ratifications. There are 3 real estate action items which are described on pages 38 through 47 of the board book distributed for this meeting. The committee recommends these items, and I move them.
Second.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye. And that concludes the Finance Committee report.
Mr. Ferrer, if you would continue, you chaired the Transit and Bus Committee. Would you please deliver that report?
Committee also met on Monday and reports the following. There were 12 procurement actions this month in a total amount of $212.7 million. There are 4 non-competitive procurements totaling $8.7 million for New York City Transit, described on pages 49 through 55 and 55 of the board book. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye. There are 3 competitive procurements totaling $194.9 million. One, New York City Transit, for New York City Transit in the amount of $72.1 million, described on pages 56 through 59 of the board book, and 2, for MTA Capital Construction for $123 million, described on pages 60 through 65 of the board book. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
I would like to note for the board, I'm recusing myself from the Second Avenue procurements. May I have a second?
Second.
Comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye. There are 5 ratifications totaling $9.1 million, 3 for New York City Transit in the amount of $6.3 million, described on pages 66 through 70 of the board book, and 2 for the MTA Capital Construction for $2.8 million, described on pages 71 to 73 of the board book. The committee recommends these ratifications, and I move them.
Second. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
And that concludes the Transit and Bus Committee report.
The Metro North Railroad Committee was, thank you, Mr. Ferrer, the Metro North Railroad Committee report from Ms. Susan Metzger.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. The Metro North Railroad Committee also met on Monday, and I report the following. There is one action item for board approval. The action item requests approval to modify the existing agreement with Rockland County to incorporate changes to the unit ticket reimbursement rate, expand Saturday Tappan Zee Express service between Rockland County and Metro North, Hudson, and Harlem lines in Westchester, and institute Sunday Tappan Zee Express bus service. The committee recommends this action, and I'm happy to move it.
Second? Any comments or questions? Veronica?
As I did on Mondays, during Monday's committee meetings, I want to thank the MTA and congratulate Rockland County for working so well with MTA staff on this. I think the expansion of Sunday service across the Tappan Zee Bridge and in this corridor is incredibly important, as is the expansion of Saturday service. And it's not only important for the 10% of Rockland residents who do not have access to a vehicle, it's important for the economy, the environment, and making sure that we have equitable transportation access in that particular corridor. Secondly, it's important just to build ridership for the new transit service that is expected to be launched in 2018 in that very same corridor. And we all know that Rockland County has had significant financial challenges over the years, and I think it's a wonderful partnership that the MTA was able to step in and support service in this way for this time period over the next 2 years.
Thank you, Veronica. Any other comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye. Thank you very much. There are 4 procurement actions in the total amount of $451 million. There are 2 non-competitive procurements in the amount of $432 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second? Any comments or questions? Mr. Pally?
I just want to comment, as I did at the Metro North Committee regarding the Kawasaki rail car purchase. As you know, for many years, I have expressed grave concern in this board and in the committees with regard to our sale of alcohol by the MTA. I believe that is not something we should be doing. I understand Connecticut wants this, and because of that, I will now support it. But I would ask, and I had conversations with the chairman, that we do a thorough review of all of our alcohol sale issues together, both on Metro North and on the Long Island Railroad, and that we come back at some suitable time soon with something this board can look at to determine what exactly should our policy be with regard to alcohol sales on the commuter railroads. I am concerned, I continue to be concerned, that the people who ride the trains don't walk to their house, they get in their car after they get off the train. And that, to me, is a significant deterrent in relation to whether or not we should sell alcohol to people who we know are going to get in their car. If I was the state of Connecticut, I would not be asking for this. I think it's wrong on their behalf. I think it's wrong on taking space that could be allowed for people to sit, who are now going to be taken up by a cab car in their point of view. And I think it's wrong for our employees to be selling alcohol. I assume we could find something better for them to do at both Metro North and the Long Island Railroad. But having said that, we will move forward on this procurement at the moment and discuss those issues at a later date. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pell. I did have a discussion with Mitch. He has had a longstanding concern about the sale of alcohol, whether it be on platforms or on trains by MTA employees. So we'll take a look at it from the standpoint of impact on potential positions. But as he said, we can find other gainfully employed jobs for them to do. Revenue impacts, but also the policy impacts from a legal and an overall policy standpoint. So I committed to do that. Any further comments on these procurements? All in favor? Aye.
There is one competitive procurement totaling $15.6 million. The committee recommends this procurement, and I move it.
Second?
Second.
Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
There is one ratification for $3.4 million. The committee recommends this ratification, and I move it.
Second, any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This concludes the report of the Metro North Committee.
Thank you, Susan. The Long Island Railroad Committee was chaired by Mitch Pally, who will deliver its report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Long Island Railroad Committee met this month, and I report the following. There are 3 procurement actions this month totaling $11.5 million. This includes the walk-in item that was presented to the committee. There are no non-competitive procurements. There are 3 competitive procurements in the total amount of $11.5 million. The committee recommends these procurements, and I move them.
Second, any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
There are no ratifications, and this concludes the report of the Long Island Railroad Committee.
Thank you, Mitch. We'll now hear from the Bridge and Tunnel Committee and its chairman, Mr. Murdler.
Mr. Chairman, the Bridges and Tunnels Committee met on Monday, and I report the following. There were 2 competitive procurements. A quorum of the committee was present and voted in favor of them, and I move it.
Second, any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye.
There were no non-competitive procurements nor any ratifications. That concludes the report of the Bridges and Tunnels Committee, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murdler. The Audit Committee was chaired by Mr. Neil Zuckerman this month, and he will deliver its report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Audit Committee met on Monday, and I report the following. There is one action item for approval. This action item requests approval for the revisions to the MTA's Enterprise Risk Management and Internal Controls Guidelines. The committee recommends this action item, and I move it.
Second, any comments or questions regarding that? All in favor? Aye.
This concludes the report on the Audit Committee. Back to you, Mr. Vitellio, for next month.
Thank you for standing in, Neil. The Corporate Governance Committee was chaired by Freddie Ferrer this month. Freddie, if you could deliver its report.
Mr. Chairman, Corporate Governance Committee met on Monday, and I report the following. There are 3 action items for approval. The first item requests approval for the revised all-agency contract procurement guidelines and all-agency service contract guidelines. The next item requests approval for the proposed revisions to the MTA all-agency travel and business expense policy. Finally, the last item requests approval of proposed revisions to the all-agency guidelines for the disposal of personal property promulgated in accordance with sections 2895, 2897 of the New York Public Authorities Law. Having lost a quorum, the committee nonetheless recommends these action items, and I move them.
Second? Any comments or questions regarding the actions Freddie just brought forward? All in favor?
Aye. And that concludes the report and all my reports, Mr. Chairman.
You ever seen the cartoon where Bugs Bunny plays every position against the Gas House Gang? It's a classic. That was a classic cartoon. Bugs Bunny was a cartoon years ago for some people in the audience who don't know who that was.
You're looking at the wrong side of the generation gap.
This side of the table knows. Okay, I apologize. I'll now turn the floor over to our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Bob Ferran, and the Director of Strategic Initiatives, Frederica Cuenca. Bob will present the November financial plan and the final proposed 2017 budget. We will vote on the 2017 budget and the financial plan in December. Frederica will describe the fare and toll increase proposals. Bob and Frederica.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You each have in front of you the Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the 2017 final proposed budget and the November financial plan 2017 to 2019. These have been prepared in a consistent manner with prior plans, and the presentation that I'm going to make this morning is consistent with prior plans as well. Let's start by looking at the July plan. In July, we presented a forecast of a $200 million operating balance at the end of this year. And as you know, we maintain our books and records on a GAAP basis, but by statute, we do it on a self-sustaining basis, which basically means we can use operating balances at the end of one year to roll forward to address deficits in the next year. So what we were projecting is the $200 million operating balance at the end of this year would roll forward to address a deficit next year, leaving an operating balance of $28 million. That rolls forward to increase an operating balance in 2018 of $68 million, rolls forward again, effectively breaks even, and then we were projecting a deficit in 2020 of $371 million. Now, that July plan was based on three key elements that are consistent with all the plans we presented. The first, it included biennial fare and toll increases. We were projecting in 2017 and 2019 a revenue yield increase of 4%, roughly 2% annually. We also increased our annually recurring savings targets. As the chairman mentioned, we're projecting that we'll hit $1.6 billion of annually recurring savings this year, but we're increasing the target and we project that we'll hit $2 billion by 2020. We also increased commitment to capital. Debt service savings were captured and set aside to provide for additional capital for the program. We accelerated some pay-as-you-go capital, about $200 million, and this saved us from having to sell debt earlier, so we saved about $39 million over the plan period. And we also made significant investments of $464 million in improved customer service, maintenance and operations, service and service support, and then safety and security initiatives. Well, what has happened since the July plan? Well, first, there's been changes in estimates that have improved our financial performance. We've had lower debt service costs, significant debt service cost of $294 million. Lower electricity forecast of $122 million over the 4-year plan period. Higher passenger and toll revenue forecast. Higher payroll mobility tax forecast and MTA aid. That's, again, the dogs and cat revenues that we receive. And lower health and welfare forecast of about $46 million. We've had some changes in re-estimates that have gone the other way, that have been negative. Lower real estate transaction tax receipts. That's primarily the real property transfer tax. That's the 1% tax that we receive on large sales of real estate. And as you'd imagine, we're starting to see that slow down. Now, when you put these all together, the net change in the financial plan period from what we forecasted in July to where we are forecasting in November has been a favorable $507 million. So what are we doing in the November plan? Well, first, we're continuing with the biennial fare and toll increases, but instead of it being 4% in yield, what we are now projecting is 4% in ticket or toll prices. And let me just explain that. When we forecast, we basically say, what are the revenues in 2016? We're increasing those revenues by 4% for 2017, so mathematically, we just increase the total revenues by that. To achieve that, because of elasticities, meaning that if you raise fares or you raise tolls, it may affect utilization, it may affect ridership, it may affect the number of crossings at a bridge. You possibly have to raise the ticket price or the toll price higher. Well, in actually putting the plan together, we are not projecting yield increases and we're not asking for yield increases. Frederica is going to show you something that is just price increase. What does this mean? This reduces the revenue to the MTA of about $26 or $27 million a year, which means that the fares and tolls will be $26 or $27 million a year lower than what we had planned. Now, how can we do that? Well, as the chairman mentioned, we've had this kind of relentless pursuit of cost savings. And as you can see on the second bullet, we set our targets. We keep increasing our targets on what we're trying to achieve in savings. And in July, we increased our targets significantly. We told you we didn't know what the initiatives would be that we would put in place, but we were going to go after them. And what we can say now is between July and November, of the $756 million of unspecified savings, we've identified and implemented, or will be shortly implementing, $229 million of those. So basically, almost a third have been identified and put in place since July, and we will continue to pursue those. We're continuing to keep in our financial plan the $566 million of debt service savings that we saw in July, and that's during the 4-year period of our plan. We've been able to accelerate another $80 million of pay-as-you-go capital. And by doing that again, the more we can front-load pay-as-you-go capital, meaning from revenues, the less debt we have to sell earlier, which means the less pressure that debt service puts on our fare box. As most of you know, every year we set aside in our budget 1% as a general reserve. This is in our budget in case we need, we have unexpected revenue shortfalls or unexpected expenses. When Sandy hit, we used this reserve to avoid having to go to the market for an emergency borrowing. We were able to cover the loss of revenues and the extra expenses. It's $145 million in the 2016 budget. We haven't had to draw that down. So what we are proposing is, just as we've asked the board in the past to do, is to authorize us through the budget to put that money as an additional contribution to one of the Long Island Railroad's closed pension plans. This plan was woefully underfunded. I think 4 years ago it had 24% funding, okay? We have been putting extra money aside, meeting our obligation, but also putting extra one-shot monies aside. If we make this contribution, we'll be somewhere, I think, in the mid-60s on that plan. So again, this is reducing a long-term liability and reducing cost going forward for savings. Then we're putting almost $400 million into maintenance and operations, customer experience, primarily for open road tolling at bridges and tunnels, and service support. With all of the investments that we're making, or proposed to be making, I should say, we're still able to maintain, a positive balance through 2019 and reduce the deficit, projected deficit in 2020 to $319 million. And you can see that on the chart here. The side-by-side comparison in the shaded, hashed, what the July plan projected, and in the solid, what the November plan is projecting. Now, we all hear comments from our customers whenever we start talking about a fare and toll increase. The comment is, I don't mind paying higher fares and tolls if I could just be certain that I'm getting something for it, that I'm getting improved service. Well, one of the things I want to do with this chart is just highlight things that we have been building into our financial plan that do provide new service or additional service. And just look at the top. The top has the expansion projects. And you all know the major mega projects that we've been working on. Well, 3 of those, the first 3, either are in service or will be in service in 2017 as we go forward. Again, these are brand new projects providing new service that our customers didn't experience before. The operating impact, not the capital cost, but the operating impact of bringing these projects online is about $75 million a year. Frankly, to put that in perspective, that's about 1/4 of the fare and toll increase that we're proposing today, and you'll hear from Frederica. So 1 cent out of the 4% that we're talking about is going directly into brand new service. And then at the bottom of the page, you see a number of the other enhancements or customer benefits that we're building into the financial plan. They're also being funded. So again, there is a direct connection between new service being provided and the request for a fare and toll increase. Now, on the next several pages, we're just highlighting some of these new investments that we're making. And again, these are in addition to the investments that we presented in July. And the first is maintenance and operations. And these aren't ribbon-cutting type things. These aren't sexy. These aren't things that people get excited about. But they're basic things that have to be done to assure continued reliable service, and we're committed to continue to make those. In terms of customer service, I think one of the biggest things that we'll do, that we have done as an organization and are doing, is open road tolling on bridges and tunnels. We all know how much support bridges and tunnels provides for mass transportation, public transportation in the region. but we need to come into the modern age in terms of how we collect our tolls and how we service our customers. This program will basically get rid of toll booths, will speed up movement through the plazas, will collect the tolls either by Easy Pass, which the predominance of all of our customers use, or by mail, by taking pictures of their license plates. It will help environmentally because you won't have cars waiting at a toll plaza. It'll speed the transfer, and this is the way the world is moving to. And we are going to put this in place. And so that is a customer amenity that we're providing to our bridge and tunnels folks. Extra money going into social media. We all have heard, we've all either experienced or we've heard complaints about the train's not in the station, something's happening, and we don't know what's going on. We continue to try to put resources in to informing our customers of what's happening and use social media to kind of do that. So there's additional investments going on there. Finally, we continue to do service and service adjustments. You know, platform service, we make these, usually don't make a big deal out of it, but we are investing additional money. And specifically, at MTA Bus, we have some underperforming lines. And so additional investments, scheduling changes will be made there. And as you heard from Commissioner Metzger and the announcement today, additional, and from Commissioner Vanderpool, there's additional monies going into Rockland County bus service, and we're pleased to be able to do that. The next chart shows by the height of the bar what were the unidentified savings targets that we presented in July. The hash part of the bar shows what we've accomplished in terms of addressing those unidentified targets. So you can see there what I said what I said at the beginning of the presentation. We are making significant progress to address these, and you just have to keep going at it. You got to keep going at it. And so, working from the headquarters and working at each of the agencies, I got to say I'm quite pleased with the efforts that are being made. Small dollars and big dollars, but things are being done to reduce our cost. Now, the chairman talked about we started cost savings in 2010 when we were definitely forced to just because of the economic environment we were in. But since that time, we've continued to raise the bar. And you can see on the legend on the right what the target, how the targets have been increased with each November plan. And you can see that we still have more to do. But the point I'd like to make is had we not engaged in this cost cutting, and had the board not been supportive of it, the $1.6 billion that we've cut out in annually recurring savings would have had to have been made up from somewhere else. Either taxes, which we don't control, or more likely, increased fares and tolls. The cost cutting we've done has avoided a 20% fare and toll increase over this period of time. And I think we've done that, and as the chairman said, we're continuing to try to do that to keep the pressure on fares and tolls as low as possible. So, once again, here's where we are. We continue to be in balance through 2019. We've reduced the deficit in 2020, and we have to continue to work to do that. So, what are the risks in front of us? Well, if we don't hit the savings targets that we've identified, if we don't come up with the issues that or the initiatives, you can see what happens to our operating balance. The deficits come earlier and they get bigger. If we don't do these biennial fare and toll increases at the level that we've projected in 17, roughly 4%, 19, 4%, you can see that the fare and toll, the deficits not only are earlier and deeper, it's untenable by the time we get out a few years. So we have to continue to maintain the discipline to cut costs and to try to minimize fare and toll increases, but have regular, predictable increases. So to sum up, let me say we got challenges ahead of us. They're similar to what you've seen before, but again, the discipline to put biennial fare and toll increases before. the board will decide the size of the increase based on our financial need, but I think having the predictability of biennial toll increases, fare and toll increases, is good. But again, the board will make the decision based on our financial needs, what the size will be. We got to continue to do efficiencies and consolidations to achieve savings. As you all are aware, our labor contracts are all going to come back again. We're going to see those beginning next year. And so we have money in the budget. We have 2% that we put into the budget for our labor contracts. It's not the 3 zeros that we did last time. We have 2% in, but we have to negotiate what we're going to do. But we are facing that. We've got the chronic looming cost of workers' compensation claims and increasing health care cost. The general economic conditions, I mean, we've gone through the longest boom period, in modern history. It's got to end at some point. And when it does, there will be, repercussions. We'll have to deal with those. Interest rates are rising. In the last week since the election, we've seen interest rates go up by 45 basis points, almost half of 1%. Well, we know that's a challenge. We're prepared to deal with these things, but we always have to remember we need to be prepared. And that really kind of brings us to the last point is, from a staff standpoint, we really appreciate the support that we've gotten from the board in terms of using one-shot revenues, non-recurring, resources to put aside to address long-term liabilities, reduce debt service if we can, and to make appropriate investments, as opposed to being forced to try to use one-shots to close a budget, because that only exacerbates a continuing problem. So we thank you for that kind of support, but we need you to continue to provide that to us. Mr. Chairman, that concludes the financial plan portion, and we can then move to the fare and toll unless there's questions.
I'll defer to the board whether they want to deal with questions now for just the financial plan and have a separate set of questions after we go through the fare and toll increase, or hold all questions to the end. What's the pleasure of the board? Any questions right now? Okay. Questions at the end. Okay. Frederica? Thank you.
Okay. Good morning. Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to run through with you the proposals that we're putting out for public discussion. We're kicking off, starting the process of increasing fares and tolls. So as we're putting together the proposal for the fare and toll changes and considered some additional concepts, we evaluated these against key policy considerations. So first, mobility and capacity. How are people using our system? What types of fares are they using to make those kinds of trips? What changes might influence people's choices? And how do those changes impact our capacity? How affordable are our services, particularly for our most frequent riders for whom transit is so critical? Are there other groups of riders or trips that we should be taking a close look at? What's the impact on the financial plan? So after all, the proposal is for a fare and toll increase. The purpose of that is to support our ongoing reliability and the service levels that we provide. And finally, is there an impact on operations? Positive, negative, that we can see coming from the proposal. So we look at all of that. So let's take a look at New York City Transit and their fare structure and how people travel. This is the current fare structure. The majority of trips, as you can see, these are in the orange and yellow, are taken using our unlimited ride passes, 52%, on both the 30-day and the 7-day that are shown there. The bonus pay-per-ride Metro card, that's the one in blue, is the next most popular with 40% of trips taken in that. And the non-bonus card is much fewer trips at 5%. So what's the difference between these two? The base fare is $275. But if a customer buys at least a round trip, the MTA adds additional value onto their Metro card, a bonus. Currently, that bonus is 11% if they put at least $550 on a card. So when you combine these things together, the effective fare that that person is paying is $2.48. Finally, there's also a small number of trips that are taken with the non-Metro card fare, either coins on the bus or a single ride limited ticket that is purchased out of the MBM, and that one is a little bit more. Okay, so let's take a look at who uses what. This data is from our customer satisfaction survey of New York City residents. So these are customer responses, not trips. So not surprisingly, frequent riders buy the pass. Less frequent riders turn to the bonus pay-per-ride instrument, as the majority of people are really loading at least a round trip onto their card when they buy fare media. Next, we're looking at by income, and we can see that all groups are using both the bonus pay-per-ride and passes. So just to give you a sense of how big each of these circles are. According to the census, the first pie of the less than 28 is about 25% of households. The middle is about 35% of households, and the more than 75 is about 40% of households. Okay. So what we also see and note is that the 7-day pass has higher usage among the low and middle income riders, and this trend is what we've observed over time as we have looked at this data. Okay, so as we typically do, we're putting forward options on how to structure the fare increase on transit. The passes will increase in the same way in both proposals. Our most frequent riders use the pass, and so what we are proposing an increase of less than 4% for these riders. The 30-day pass will increase from $116.50 to $121. That's a 3.9% increase. For 7-day passes, we are proposing an increase of 3.2%. So the differences in these two proposals really come in the pay-per-ride MetroCard. Because the base fare has to increase in quarter increments, we are limited in our alternatives. So you can either leave the base fare at $2.75 or you can raise it a quarter. But remember, the vast majority of trips are taken with this bonus, so we can adjust the amount of the bonus to give a more fine tune for most of our customers. So let's go through the options. So if we leave the base fare at $2.75, we will decrease the bonus to 5% if someone purchases $5.50. So the effective fare there goes from $2.48 to $2.62. Alternatively, we can increase the base fare and also increase the bonus to 16% with a round-trip purchase. And in that scenario, the effective fare goes up to $2.59. So you can see for the vast majority of customers, there's a difference, but it's small. And we are indifferent to each of these proposals. We want the customers and the public and the board to consider which one. Right, yes. Right. So we're indifferent from a financial plan perspective. Right. Okay. The express bus fare, we take a similar approach. Hardly anybody pays with cash, and so it's really about the bonus pay-per-ride customer fare. Excuse me. Okay, let's move on to the railroads. Travel on monthly and a few weekly tickets is the largest market on the railroads. These are the commutation fares. They are used by our regular commuters that travel during the peak, coming back and forth on a daily basis. And most of our the ridership on the commuter railroads has recovered to pre-2008 levels. So we're seeing that coming back. The non-commutation tickets are these ones in blue. They are both peak and off-peak tickets, and you can see that the off-peak, is the larger market. Metro North also has a large intermediate market. These are trips that are taken outside of Manhattan and are serving job centers like White Plains. Okay. So on the railroads, we also focused on those riders who are most reliant on our services, the commuter. So we recognize that monthly tickets can get expensive. They're hundreds of dollars a month, and so a 4% increase on this large ticket price can lead to large absolute dollar amounts. So we took a close look at that. And what we're doing, what we're proposing, is that the increase for the monthly tickets be capped, and weekly, capped at 3.75%, and that no monthly ticket will go up more than $15. As on transit, other tickets do have to go up in quarter increments, so you get this range of increases. And so here we're just looking at the city terminals, which is the bulk of the one-way tickets, and you'll see a range of increases up to a little over 6%, but any increase greater than 6% is only 50 cents. Okay. All right.
City ticket remains.
Yeah, oh, and the city ticket remains unchanged this round. West of Hudson, this is a small but unique market. It's 2% of Metro North's ridership. The recession and Hurricane Irene have continued to have an effect on the ridership there, and the fares for these customers are also impacted, or for some of these customers are impacted by New Jersey Transit and by PATH fare policy decisions, so they've had multiple increases. So we're recommending a 2% increase for this market. Okay. All right, taking a look at bridges and tunnels. So 79% of crossings are taken with a New York City Customer Service Center Easy Pass tag. Okay. This pass provides a 30% discount at least on the crossing over the cash price or under the cash price. We have an even greater discount on the Henry Hudson Bridge or at some of the minor crossings. And we also provide additional rebates and discounts for resident programs in Staten Island and the Rockaways. The Easy Pass market share has increased by 10% since 2010. That's really due to the great work that Bridges and Tunnels has done to encourage people to transition to Easy Pass. And so we've seen that increasing. And the non-New York City Customer Service Center Easy Pass customers pay the cash or toll-by-mail amount. Okay. So here we're proposing increases of less than 25 cents for everyone. The majors will increase at 4%, and everyone else is a little bit less. Resident tokens and trucks also increase approximately 4%. Only 3 crossings have any significant volume of commuters or people who are using the bridge every day, and those do have resident rebate programs. The state does determine what happens with the Verrazano Narrows Bridge rebate. Okay. On the cash or toll by mail, we do have to increase it a little bit more to hit the quarter and 50-cent increments that we need to do. So those will be increasing over 4%, and we hope that this will continue to encourage people to move into Easy Pass, particularly as we're moving towards the open road tolling. Okay. So a number of different prices and pricing ideas have been proposed by various constituencies. Proposals include half fare for low-income New Yorkers, subsidized fares for college and university students, freedom ticket, suburban weekend ticket. We evaluated each of these proposals, its merits and the challenges against the 4 policy considerations that I mentioned earlier: mobility, capacity, affordability, cost, and operations. And we were going to continue to review these proposals against these key priorities. We will also be looking at the other issues associated with this, like funding and administration and the operation. So each one of these proposals has merit. And challenges, not all the same. It's not always cost, it's not always operations, but we're going to be continuing to look at these. Okay. So next step. So today, we're asking you to authorize the start of the fare and toll process. You will be hearing from the public during November and December. We will have, make the information public on our website. We'll have public hearings in December. And we will also be getting comments in writing, via email, and all of that information will be made available to you. In January, you'll be reviewing all of these public comments and then taking a vote on the final proposal. And then the fare and toll change is implemented in March. Okay. So let me just leave you with a summary of the highlights of this proposal. As Bob mentioned, the MTA's focus on cost reduction and efficiencies has enabled us to maintain this affordability for all of our customers and to do a 4% price increase. The November plan reduces the impact on all of our customers, 26 million less annual revenue to the MTA and a smaller increase for our customers. The average increase for is approximately 3.5% for our most frequent users, 52% of New York City Transit ridership on passes, 30-day at 3.9% increase, and the 7-day at the 3.2% increase. The railroads' monthly and weekly passes increase up to 3.75% with the $15 cap on the monthlies, and tolls for our Easy Pass customers at less than 25 cents. And this is the lowest increase that the MTA has proposed since starting the biennial fare and toll increases in 2009.
Now I'd like to open it up to any questions any of the board members have, either on the financial plan or the fare and toll increases. Mr. Zuckerman?
Thank you, sir. Bob, thank you for a very thoughtful presentation. I know that you spent many months building this plan, and I think it's balanced, I think it's thoughtful, and I appreciate it greatly. Speaking for the small, sub-100,000 person county of Putnam, I did have a couple of comments. One, the riders and the elected officials of the county typically think about safety, service, and value as the trifecta of what matters to riders. I will tell you that I appreciate the attention to all three in this plan for our riders. Safety, while not explicitly written as we get through to PTC by the end of 2018, when you talk to folks on the platform, is the number one thing they care about, and I appreciate the continued focus on that. Service, this is one system, and so while I don't notice any specific things tied to Putnam County itself, I know that you are building infrastructure in the city that our riders use on a daily basis when they come into Grand Central and ride the system, so we appreciate that. The most important thing, though, is value in this plan, and I want to applaud the work that you've done to try and find a way to manage the absolute cost increases, whether for my colleagues from Dutchess or Suffolk. We have an amazing out-of-pocket expense. One of my employees at my firm drives from Rhinebeck to Poughkeepsie in Dutchess County, pays $506 a month, $6,000 a year, not including parking, not including gas, not including owning 2 cars. That's a huge burden on an individual. And the fact that under this plan with a $15 cap, Amory Gonzalez will only be paying a 2.96% price increase and not a 3.75%. While the dollar amounts are not massive, 15 versus 20 some odd, it is over time will help to flatten out the ends. And as a system, we have to have fair fares, and I appreciate this attempt to try and flatten out the expensive ends of the system. It is greatly appreciated, and I thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Mr. Jones? David?
Thank you. So I'd like to take you, may not be surprised, I'm going to take you to your slide 5. Yes, on the fare proposal. Let me first start, why the number 28,000? The poverty line in the United States is 24,000. Do you have statistics that actually take you down to the poverty line?
So in the survey, I don't have the exact cuts in here of exactly where what we wanted to do was be able to have enough people in each pie to make sure that we had a be able to show a robust number. But we do collect information of household size and income at, I believe, at a more detailed degree so that we can make the poverty determination.
Right. I think as a board member, we'd appreciate having that more granular information. But let me also take you down into that first pie chart. And I'm not good at math. I did pass the Regents, but just barely. Sorry. Essentially, 64% of that low-income category are confined in the bonus, base, and cash arena, if you calculate it all together. And that's the overwhelming majority, obviously, of low-income people are obviously in the least advantageous area of the fare structure. In other words, if they have to go every day. But when I look at the increases that you're suggesting, those particular categories get hit pretty hard. The bonus, theoretically, at least in one model, would go up 9%. You know, you're talking about potentially as high as 16%. You know, it seems like we're tilting again when 64% of this particular population is getting the most increases almost under any scenario. I don't know if that's correct, but, and I agree with you, you know, the 7-day pass and the 30-day pass, if we could start migrating people to it. But obviously, at least in our review and understanding and anecdotal stuff, understand that $116 for a 30-day pass is beyond the means of many, if not most, individuals who are really low income. We're also worried because even at the 24,000 threshold, many New Yorkers are even below that. So we're wondering as that goes on. But in terms of your interpretation of why we're seeing such a relatively high percentage increase on a large group of very low-income people.
So let me just, I'll go through this. The base and the bonus is you have to think through how they fit together, right? So in one, we are not proposing to increase the base, but as we showed in one of the pie charts, 40% of the market is with the bonus. And 48% of our market, our trips, are on a pay-per-ride instrument. So there has to be some increase from those customers, right? So the way we can modulate that, if we're not increasing the base fare, is by decreasing that bonus amount that we add to the Metro card when people buy a round-trip ticket, right? So instead of putting 11% bonus, we're only going to give you 5% bonus. Okay, so that is the way that we can get more, you know, have an increase on the bonus pay-per-ride customer, right? In the other proposal, we can increase the base fare, but also increase that bonus amount that we're giving you, so that we end up with an increase on those customers, but it's slightly less. So we are proposing an increase. So in one, the proposal where we don't change the base fare, the vast majority of the pay-per-ride customers will experience a 5.7% increase.
Right.
In the one where we do increase the base fare, the vast majority of the pay-per-ride customers will experience a 4.4% increase. So yes, this is more than the passes, but our view and is that for someone who's really riding, this is a very, very important part of your budget and your activity and your needs, and so we want to keep that increased lower. And
one other thing, as you can imagine, I mean, this is a balance. We're trying to go back and forth and figure out how to make things more affordable to those who need it most. Affordable for all. But the interesting thing about the pay-per-ride on the charts, if you look at the pie chart on the left, less than 28, the pie chart on the right, more than 75, the biggest user, or the biggest media used by those making more than $75,000 a year, the wealthiest, is that same pay per ride. So if we were to take the pay per ride and give that the biggest benefit, we'd be giving a lot of benefit to the wealthiest, as opposed to trying to be able to direct things to those who need it most. So that's kind of the trade-offs that you're going back and forth, and it's.
But is the end the same? Or, in other words, the number of riders who earn 75,000 and above, in terms of actual population use, are each of the pie charts representing equal numbers of people?
No, so I told you that these are the distribution of households, so
Right.
25% in the low income group.
Yeah.
The middle is about 35% of households.
Right.
Right. And the highest one is about 40% of households, right?
I normally hold my comments for the end, but
Sure.
I'd like to respond to this
Sure.
because it's a very key point. I've worked in a number of different systems. The issue of social fare became prominent in the Pacific Northwest when I was in Vancouver. You've got systems in Portland and Seattle that are trying to deal with that issue, as well as San Francisco. One could make an argument as to whether or not we're getting two dichotomies in the population in terms of low income and higher income. I think those are all valid data points. But I had a board member who was an elected official in Vancouver, and one of the things he said to me, every once in a while somebody said to me, have an aha moment. And we gave him a pass, we let him ride the system, and he wrote it for the first time in large amounts. And he said, we were having a discussion on fare policy. And he was sensitive to the social fare issue. And he says, you know, because there was a discussion about how we should price the fare structure for that lower end of people that truly are dependent on transit. And he said, we shouldn't base the fare policy in toto across the entire economic spectrum and cut back how much we charge, because we don't, in their system, it's underpriced as well. It's a very good service for what they get. He said we should figure out ways to subsidize people at the lower end of the spectrum. So I have reason to believe at this board, every one of us is sensitive to the social fare issue. So the question is, how do we address it? Do we address it by holding fares down and letting some people who actually can afford more of their disposable income or their income on transportation, or do we subsidize the end of the spectrum where they're really dependent on it? That is a social issue that every transit system in the United States is addressing to various degrees, because we do want to make sure we take care of our core constituency. We want to make sure those people who are totally dependent on us have an ability to ride as well. So, and we applaud your efforts in terms of raising this issue. You raised it to the City Council, you've raised it here, because it is one of the real issues we have to deal with as a board, balancing policy, service, and fiduciary responsibility.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Merdler?
Following on Mr. Jones's question, would we be harmed economically, the MTA as an entity, if, as a follow-up to the proposal made by Commissioner Jones, the City of New York, as part of its progressive agenda, were to fully subsidize that differential by providing whatever means are required to get those people below the poverty line the kind of fare that they can afford to meet?
You know, as long as the full fare is being paid one way or another, either directly by the user or in combination with a subsidy provided by someone else, we're not harmed. But that is a discussion and an issue beyond our staff. That's a dialogue that has to take place with a number of other parties.
One thing I'd like to say is that for those of us who've been part of this process for a long time, I'm preaching to the choir, but this is the start of a legislative required process where we notice to the public what are the alternatives being considered. We're going to hold a number of public hearings and elicit comment from people. The decisions we make with respect to fare and toll policy will be made in an informed way with the board based upon that input or other conversations we have with other stakeholders at the January board meeting. Jamie?
A couple of comments or thoughts and then a question going back to the budget. First of all, I'd like to echo my colleague Neil's comments that this is a very thoughtful presentation and both in terms of the budget and in terms of the fares and slicing and dicing the fare increases different ways, which is greatly appreciated and nice work. In terms of the social fare, I I think it's worth thinking through the fact that these fare increases will have to come in relatively short order. We're talking about fare increases that we need to vote on in January to put in place in March. And I would say to us as a board, I suspect there is going to be a variety of opinions on social fare, that time frame will be difficult to conclude a social fare in that time frame, and we need the fare increase in some manner, and maybe there's a way to look at, if you look at the numbers here on households of less than 75,000, if you somewhat disproportionately gave discount or lowered the increase on the base fare, base MetroCard and the cash and single ride ticket fare, you're helping 27% of households with under $75,000 in household income without really helping too much or lowering, suppressing the fare for households with over $75,000 in income. And maybe for all of ourselves, it is something to think about as opposed to trying to get through a social fare in this time frame. And speaking for the counties, the social fare raises a number of other very complicated issues for us because we are one system, and it will lead to, if we have a social fare, even a subsidized, any kind of fare based on income, people looking to the same kind of policies on the commuter railroads, on our bus systems in those counties, and it is really a complicated issue that I'd be a little surprised if we got through by the January vote. So I just wonder if there are some other ways to slice and dice this to help those with the lower income households. And I also have some apprehension about even subsidy that the city might offer in order to implement the social fare, in that there are other subsidies that they have committed to over the years, including for student MetroCard, that then were not forthcoming in terms of payment. And so it is a little unnerving to think about even a model where we say, well, this, it'll cost us to do it for these lower household incomes, whatever, X dollars, but the city's going to give us that because those have a way of sort of dissipating over time, those subsidies. So just food for thought for us all about maybe there's a way to help those households that, at least for the next vote, is something other than a social fare. I'm sure this will create some comment from others. I want to ask one more mundane thing before that happens related to budget. Bob, if you could get this information, don't need to know it right now, but what is the balance of the underfunding on that IRR pension plan? Just trying to understand the runway on how long we would have to apply these contingency funds to that. And if I'm not mistaken, we have a Metro North plan, a legacy plan, or maybe an active one that is still underfunded as well. Is that true?
Yeah, most of our pension plans, whether they're managed by along with the city or by the state or even ours, they're in the high percentages. I think our plan is in the Metro North plan is in the high 60s, 70s, and there is a path to follow. We have an actuarially determined way of filling that in. So we are doing that on all our plans, but we were so far behind on this closed additional pension plan that, to me, it just made economic sense.
Absolutely,
but
I think it does.
But the others are on path. We're funding what we're supposed to be funding, and we're in good shape.
So
Years ago, Mebstoa and Long Island Railroad, I think, were in the 20 and 30%, which were unacceptable. So we've been chiseling away at them and trying to get to the norm. No plan is 100%. Very few plans are 100%. You know that better than anybody.
Yeah.
But we're trying to get in that sweet spot range of where it should be funded.
So just whenever the staff gets a chance, if I could see the plans, what the presumed rate of return is, and valuing those plans, and the dollar value of the underfundings, I would be really curious, because those can be really impactful, as they obviously are, since we're talking about using dollars to pay down that underfunding that are almost equal to some of these customer service improvements that we're making. So this is meaningful stuff, and we should keep an eye on it.
Veronica had her hand up next, and then Andrew, and then Polly. Veronica?
Thank you. It's great to see the evolution of fare and toll proposals over time. I've been on the other side for many, many years at the fare hearings, voicing my discontent over some of the inequities that we've seen. And though there's a lot of questions, or some questions and some concerns, and I echo many of the concerns raised by Commissioner Jones, and I appreciate the answers that you've given and provided to that and the explanations to that. I think we are in a better place, and I look forward to hearing the public's comments on these proposals. I am also concerned about the increase on the single ride and, you know, the bonus. And again, you've expressed it, you've explained that a little further, but it still feels a bit unsettling to me. But it'll be helpful to see how this continues to be discussed and other information that you all will share with staff. Staff will share with the board, rather. With regards to the city ticket and the freedom ticket, I've had some discussions with you all already, and I think that these are proposals that really do deserve serious consideration and merit, and I understand that you are doing that and undergoing that. We, as a city, and particularly the Bronx and Queens, are in a unique position where we have infrastructure that should be maximized, transit infrastructure that should be maximized. And, you know, as a Bronx girl, I'm reminded that the Bronx hosts a good deal of roadway transportation infrastructure, which is residents primarily do not use, because outside of Manhattan, the Bronx has the lowest household car ownership rate. So it reminds me that we don't want to have transit infrastructure in communities that can't be used by the residents that host that infrastructure. And I think that the city ticket and the freedom ticket proposals do provide opportunities to significantly reduce the commute for Queens, Bronx residents, but then of course opens up so many opportunities beyond those users and those commuters. And I think I understand that these are proposals that can be considered at any point and at any time and can be implemented, but I think tying it very closely, as best as we can, to this overall discussion really does elevate the serious consideration that this agency has taken to maximize that transit infrastructure. And then the last point that I want to make is we've talked a little bit, not just in this board meeting, but at others, about subsidies and how do we provide subsidies to reduce costs and burdens to particular users. Particularly in the past, we've talked about, or rather today we're talking about providing subsidies for low-income users of the system. And we know that there's a good deal of precedent for that. We know that there has been a toll subsidy for the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, and I particularly have not been a fan of that subsidy to reduce tolls. I think Staten Island residents deserve better transit, and that money should go towards improving transit on Staten Island so fewer people have to rely on their cars. But I think we need to keep that in mind when we're talking about subsidies. And I'm not making a comment on a particular subsidy. I'm just saying that subsidies are often handed out in often discriminate ways. And we need to think about that in a larger discussion when we're talking about subsidizing low-income fares. Thank you.
Andrew?
So I appreciate the presentation and your willingness to continue to look at Freedom Ticket. There is an awful number, as you just heard, awful number of people in the boroughs that are underserved by our subway system, and this is a way of getting them into the system, saving them time, possibly increasing their monthly payment to the MTA. There's just a whole host of, removing overcrowding from several subway lines. There's just a lot of good reasons to continue to look at Freedom Ticket. I have an idea, considering the chairman's reservations about how a pilot could work, and I'll talk to you at another time about that. On the issue of the pie charts that we've been seeing, since strap hangers are not asked to produce a W-2 when they buy a Metro card, I assume these are done by surveys, and do we know what percentage or an approximate percentage of the traveling public we've reached with these surveys?
So representative sample of the ridership. It's a survey that we do every year. It's a product of our customer satisfaction survey. So it's a survey of about 1,200 people, and I think it turns out to be a slightly smaller percentage of total riders, but it's a representative sample of the city population.
One of the things we are struggling with, and I'm not trying to make a joke here, the amount of information we can get to make informed decisions by polling people, the methods pollsters use to get that information, the degree to which the person answering the poll is fully honest and forthcoming about all factors that are key to making an informed decision. I think we had a presidential election that brought into focus some things about that. And so when I say we're struggling, I like this board because we make informed decisions. And it's incumbent upon staff to bring forward information and cut the information in ways that is useful to you to make informed decisions. So we had this aha moment with the 20-year needs survey about the changing demographics. We know what the aging of the asset is, but the changing demographics of the millennials. So the issue of how we gather this information for these special policy decisions we need to make for fare and tolls is something that we really need to explore and probably be exhaustive in. And that does run counter. I think Jamie raised the point in terms of if we accelerate a process to make an ill-informed decision, that's doing the wrong thing. If we want pressure on a process to make an informed decision and not put off to another day that which we can't decide today, I think that's where we need to be. Every one of these proposals has merit. If you're a transportation policy person, and a lot of us have spent a whole career in here, these issues from a sustainability standpoint, maximization of transportation asset, are the right decisions to make. We got to get the information to make that decision. Polly, I'm sorry, you were next.
Okay. Oh, where to begin? Well, first of all, thank you. It was a good presentation. And look, I think all of us on this board, we take our fiduciary duties seriously, and we know, one thing the MTA has benefited from in recent years is having regular fare and toll increases, unlike, let's say, our counterpart across the river in New Jersey Transit, where they went many years without one and then had to do a 9% increase, which really hurt people's pocketbooks. But I'm certainly glad my colleagues and others have been talking about, some of the nuances of fare policy. It's very, very important that we try and make sure we keep the agency solvent, but think through, how we can make a fare and toll policy that's fair for all the people of the region. I'm glad to David of raising the issues of income and how we address those, and a big supporter, Andrew, and his group have put forth some very creative ideas on City Ticket. I will certainly say in my Freedom Ticket. I can certainly say in my travels as commissioner, I hear a lot about that issue, particularly in southeastern Queens, and I think the travel time savings there for folks that that at this point can't afford to pay the regular Long Island Railroad monthly pass would be in this business. As Tom says, a lot of us have a lot of experience in this business. When someone can save 45 minutes on their commute, that can be transformative in your life, and I hope we will continue to look at those. And for the record, I think the city is certainly interested in being a partner in thinking about that. But I guess I just have to say a couple things to my colleagues. First of all, I think you don't have a good understanding of all the deals between the city and the MTA, so I'll take a minute to go through them, because I don't understand your assertion the city isn't paying for the student fares. It was a deal cut some years ago where the city agreed to pay a portion, the MTA agreed to pay a portion. The city's portion was capped, predates all of us. You may or may not like that decision, but such was the decision. The city pays its portion. At one point, I think the state was going to pay more and then stopped, and the MTA started eating it out of its own hide, and that's been frustrating for them. But I don't think it's fair to say we're not paying what we agreed to pay, likewise on Access-a-Ride, which I'll get to. I'll just say on the other side of the ledger, just so people are aware, the city has committed $2.5 billion in capital. The city also covers the full cost of MTA bus, a deal that was also agreed to some years ago and there's no cap on that, and that is essentially growing at an exponential rate. We're now spending almost $500 million a year on that. So I think just to sort of know your facts about what the agreements are between the city and the MTA, the city is a robust contributor to the MTA. So just to be clear there, we don't walk away from our commitments. In terms of whether, the city should sort of step up and cover all the social fare policies, as I say, I think it's something city's open to discussing. I would say, I don't know why it would only be for the city to do it. I don't know why the state would not be a partner in that. And just sort of a reminder, this board is not actually the elected representatives of the city. That's the city council and the mayor. So I think if that's sort of something genuine that folks around the table want to do, this isn't actually the right group of people to make that decision. You have to actually go to the elected officials of the city, who I think some of them have said that they're open to that discussion. So just to be clear. Sorry, just one more thing. And I think on Accessoride, that's one area, for example, where the city, particularly our Taxi and Limousine Commission, has been working very closely with New York City Transit. I think there is definitely agreement for both parties that there are a lot of ways we can make that system more efficient. We can tap more into the city's existing accessible taxi fleet, and potentially that could unlock some real savings. Maybe some of those savings, which I think would accrue to both entities since we both contribute to the cost of Accessoride, could go potentially for some of the social policy things we want to achieve with fare. So I think rather than sort of cast dispersion, let me say the city's a willing partner here, ready to look at creative ways to do that, not shirking its responsibilities, but decisions on the city's part involve the city's elected officials.
So I've meant no offense to...
Jamie, we do have to follow Robert's Rules of Order.
Sorry.
Okay. Not that you don't have a right to speak, but there's some other people that want to talk. Mitch, that's okay.
Should I yield my time to the...
At the risk, I'm going to let a few more comments go, but this issue of the subsidy, this issue of the discussion is one that has come up before. We need to deal with it. I don't necessarily know if we need to be exhaustive today on this issue with respect to the fare and toll hearings, but I also don't want to stifle conversation. This board is very good at communicating and sharing their thoughts so we make informed decisions, so I'm going to let it go for a while. But I think you will see from the sentiment here, this is an issue we do need to deal with probably in a separate form. A board meeting, but not necessarily today. But Mitch, I want to cut it off. I do not want to cut it off right now.
That's okay. I just wanted to express my issues on a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank both Frederica and Bob for the very informative discussion and presentation. It's an interesting context in the suburbs, for those of us from the far-reaching suburbs, that the lower the income person, the further out you live, the more you pay. That has connotations both on Long Island and I'm sure my friends in the Hudson Valley, which is to some degree distinctly opposite of the way it actually should be. But because of long-standing tradition and other issues, it is what has happened. And now that's not to say that's as important as a subsidy for low-income people, David. I don't mean to put it in that context, but it is an issue that relates to the suburbs far greater than it may relate to other things. And so I think at some point we have to understand that. I think you are beginning to understand that in relation to the cap on the increase, so that, while, as I always say in my business, I don't pay my bills with percentages, I pay it with cash. That's how people pay. They pay with cash, whether they pay it on their credit card or whatever. They're not looking at the percentage, they're looking at the number. And that number in many places on the island, and I know in the Hudson Valley, get to be, I would say, a little high or exorbitant the further you out you go and that. We're obviously on the island hoping and soon to give people a lot more service. Second track, third track, which we did today, are all related to the expansion of service. And people will get a lot more of that, and hopefully west of Hudson will get the same thing sooner with your yard. Those are related issues that people look at to say, what am I getting for my aspect of it? I just want to indicate, notwithstanding coming from the suburbs, I strongly support David's point on lower income. I think we have to look at that, however, from a regional perspective. And I also support Freedom Ticket. I think it's innocuous of us to have trains go by people and they can't get on the train. That makes no sense. Now, I understand there are operational issues to make that happen,
and we should try to find solutions to those operational issues so that everybody in the region can get on the train wherever the train goes in that regard, wherever it happens to be. We're one place, we should do that. I also want to thank you for including in the study and continuing the study on the suburban ticket. Metro North has done a very, very good job, and some of that is because of demographics, and some of that are because of things that they do that we don't do on Long Island, in relation to providing an intra-community purpose for their train system. We don't do that on Long Island. To the largest degree, almost everybody who gets on the train ends up in Penn Station, and that's another discussion, but we'll have that later on. But we need to figure out ways to encourage people to take the train on Long Island from one spot on the island to another spot on the island without having to go under the East River tunnels. And including that in this proposal for a further review is important to me. I'm sure it's important to John, and it's important to my friends from Metro North. That is an essential component of this. We have to figure out a way to encourage people to do it because the train is there, and business is beginning to realize, I have a saying on Long Island, for all these years, everybody wanted to live as far from the train station as possible. Now everybody wants to live as close to the train station as possible, okay? And which is a great thing. And businesses are beginning to realize to locate near the train station is a benefit. And we have to be part of that solution to help their employees get from one spot on the island to another spot on the island. That's even going to be more important when Ronkonkoma becomes online. It's going to be even more important when Heartland is built near Deer Park. There are a lot of these issues that are forthcoming that I encourage us to continue that effort to try to find that solution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Susan?
First of all, thank you. You've done a wonderful job, and I know it's difficult to come up with the permutations that you come up with. I appreciate that. I appreciate the comments of my fellow board members. I think Tom said that, as I believe, there's general support for a social ticket or a social fare on the board. I too agree that it has to be done in a way that includes the suburbs, not excludes them, because we suffer from the same kind of difference in income that everybody does. I also very much appreciate that you recognized that west of Hudson is a very small but a very unique market. We've been with Metro North since the beginning. We've paid the same MTA fees and taxes as the other Metro North communities. We tend not to be as affluent, so those fees have been a burden. It's particularly difficult to justify it to my constituents when we don't have hourly service and we are captive to two other transit agencies' fare increases. So I appreciate that you took the time to figure out what a burden it was for west of Hudson to incur the kinds of increases that we have been making. Thank you very much.
Did you have a comment, Ira? I thought somebody raised their hand here.
My comments are much shorter because Mitch Pally said what I had to say, and a large portion about the fares.
You can donate your time back.
That portion of it, yes. But I do want to thank the presentation from Frederica and from Bob. It was excellent, and I appreciate the analysis, and I appreciate that the proposal does cap commuter fares, does cap the increases in commuter fares, especially because as we know, people living farther away from the centers, from Manhattan, the reason why they live there often is because the property value is less. That's something they could afford. That's been an historical thing. I know I've heard from people who knew my parents that did that. So that's becoming a larger issue, the long commute they have, and also some of them also buy the monthly Metro card, or they buy the bonus Metro card. So that's something to think about. As far as Southeastern Queens goes, I've been a proponent of that, an advocate of that for quite some time. The same answer that we receive now about why it can't be done right now is the answer I got 20 years ago. Was it 20? Doesn't matter. Is that we're going to have to wait till we improve capacity. I suppose that's east side access. That's the answer as I remember it. And it'd be good to see that. Especially since the promise for good service to southeastern Queens really dates from a proposal to build a subway in southeastern Queens, which never happened. So we do have the Long Island Railroad there right now. That's an opportunity that should be taken advantage of, and Mitch mentioned that. I do have one question about, I do have a feeling about it, but I'm not going to say anything about what's the best route and for us to have a social fare. But these surveys now were done every year. I thought they were done every couple of years. But it would be good to see, because I know when we've increased the fare, we've had this debate about the bonus, the monthly, who can afford the monthly. People can't afford the $100 and whatever for a monthly pass. We've heard testimony about it. But every time we increase, sometimes we go back and forth. Let's not increase the base fare. We'll increase the monthly more because people use the base fare. Or then we do the reverse. I'd like to see if these numbers here in these categories, how much they've changed over time. I think that might give us some inkling of what goes on with people as we do that, and we'll be able to make that leap of faith to go one way or the other to maybe favor the bonus MetroCard because we are helping people, because it does increase mobility, and it may actually help a lot of people.
You raise a good point, and the point is to what extent do the people understand the value for money proposition on the paper ride and the bonus card? Because if they actually can afford it, but they're afraid they're not getting value for it, that's a failure on our part, and we need to be able to communicate that. Any more questions on this side? We're going around for a second round quickly here. Mr. Merdler?
Mr. Chairman, I may have misheard, but I had the impression that somebody said because in the forgotten borough of the Bronx we have something resembling a roadway system, there may be less need for public transit. That is not correct. The people in the East Bronx don't have it. They need it, they deserve it, and thanks to this chairman, we are seeing the beginning of a 4 stations possibility with Metro North. And were it not for the significant operational difficulties that have been called to our attention, I would say Queens should not be alone in functioning on any Freedom Ride. The people in Melrose, the people who live in the Marble Hill projects could just as easily and appropriately use Metro North trains to get in and out of Grand Central in a few minutes rather than having to slog their way one way or another to get to work. But I do understand that the operational issues can provide a barrier. And I do want to make note that I, for one, would love to see Commissioner Trottenberg's detailed presentation on what the City of New York and this administration have done by way of commitments toward subsidies and how they have fulfilled those commitments. I look forward to that presentation and would ask in that regard, am I correct that on the Verrazano Bridge, the tolls are supported by subsidies from the state of New York and the MTA and not a dime from the City of New York? If that is correct, I think that is a telling point, and I thank you.
I want to make sure I didn't give you a chance, Norman, to talk first time, so I apologize.
Big mistake, Tom.
Spoken with.
Yeah. But if flattery matters to you, for me, it was a very excellent, clear presentation. As you know, you can chop these numbers up any number of ways, and we here you make a very clear presentation, and we ask you, of course, to chop them up in more different ways. But I guess my objection to, it's not really an objection, but I feel that the term social fare is very imprecise, and each of these, I mean, I was here for almost every one of these, which have now become apparently antisocial fares, the fares that advantage people that take it in monthly increments, so that all those things were done for social equity reasons when they were done, and also for capacity utilization issues that I think Veronica raised, and that's also relevant. Now, and as far as the periphery and in the suburban areas served by Metro North and Long Island Railroad, it is true the further out you live, the generally lower income people live, but it is true also that they're paying a higher fare, but it's also true that it's a subsequently higher subsidy to support it. The fare box recovery rates are much lower in those areas, and the additional increment subsidized by everybody else is higher. So in terms of social equity, I don't know how anybody can put this in terms of what's fair and what's not fair. Poor people are going to get the short end of the stick either way. And I've always advocated a thing where, like, unemployment insurance ought to include some sort of fare, or maybe they hand out Metro cards with unemployment insurance. Other things, maybe perhaps public housing. We're always trying to protect public housing in their access to mass transit. Perhaps it would be better just to include that as part of your rent and public housing. There's many ways to approach social equity, but every time I hear the word fair, not fair, F-A-R-E, but F-A-I-R, English is such a hard language, that I always wondered, well, it's fair to you, but it's not fair to the other guy. It's not fair to the guy down the street. And it's just a term that has almost no use at all in this environment. And social, I don't think, has to be that way. I know what you mean when you say social fair. You mean something that protects poor people, and, I applaud that,
See if we can come up with another term, seriously. We don't want to say anything that's disparaging or infers that. I will make a plug. There's a relationship, you touched on it, between housing and housing costs and transportation. There's a pretty good report by the Citizens Budget Commission that talks about that. And while New York has some of the highest costs for housing, it has some of the lowest costs for transportation. And maybe the dialogue ought to extend over into, how you share those costs and how you share those burdens. Let's take a couple more questions, and then I think we need to go forward with a vote. Jamie?
So, first of all, Commissioner, I didn't mean to slight the city. I'll tell you what I was specifically referring to, and it may be a misperception on my part. But there is a perception in some part of the counties that there is a subsidy I was specifically referring to the student transportation that is not in line with at least the written MOU that I'm aware of existing. I believe that we're running over $200 million in annual cost on student MetroCards. Bob, you can probably tell me whether that's right, but I believe it's over $200 million a year that's subsidized neither by the state or by the city. There's a perception in the counties, and I don't believe we have enough data to even know this. If we do, I haven't seen it, that between mortgage recording tax, between sales tax, and between fare revenue, that the counties are subsidizing the city, and that is a significant element of it. And there was a frustration on that particular one because that is in order for the city to comply with its obligation to transport students, which the counties have also, but can't do it through the MTA. And I think if you are correct that we're operating in compliance with the MOU and it's just sour grapes about a deal that the counties may regret having been made, then I apologize. Bob, I'm curious if I'm right, though. I believe it was a minimum. Is there a 20? Did we agree?
Let's agree to do this at another time.
Okay.
This is just extending the discussion that needs to be held.
That's fine.
But we need to be able to take an action so we can start the legislative required process. Polly?
All right, I will be brief. I think this is one thing that I may agree with Chuck on. I am happy to do said presentation. In fact, I'd be happy not to do it just for you, Chuck, but for the whole board, because obviously it sounds like there's a lot of interest all around about all these old deals. I think maybe a lot of people might be unhappy about the different deals that have occurred over the years involving many of our predecessors. But I think I would relish the chance to talk about those deals, I think more explicitly about what the city sees as its contributions. I think part of that is also looking at what the city's taxpayers contribute up in Albany. You can't take that out of the equation, but I think that's a fantastic discussion for the board to have, and have it publicly, and let everyone have a good sense of whether the constructs we have now make sense and whether we need to do things differently. Again, most of those deals were things that involve our legislators up in Albany, or perhaps our city council and our mayor. They can't be undone by this group, but that could be done by the, fixed, amended, undone by the relevant elected officials. So I make that offer. I hope someone will take me up on it. Would be happy to do
A
it.
conversation on any and all levels, public, private, would be appreciated, sincerely. I would like to do now is, I move that the board authorizes the chairman and the CEO and his designees to proceed with the steps necessary to consider proposals for fair and toll changes, including the issuance of public notices and the holdings of public hearings to elicit public comment on such proposals as described in the staff summary. I moved it. Is there a second? Any further comment or question? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. So you may now have a motion to adjourn the meeting. Second, all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much for your time, everyone.
This issue of platform doors is driving me crazy. It's so bad. It's so dumb.
Well,
How the picture look? Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Mic check. It's not for you. Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Check, 1, 2. Check, 1, 2, 3.
Regarding the city ticket or some of those proposals, has the MTA ever in the past gone into the weeds there and actually created a special ticket kind of structure? Or the MTA, has the MTA?
Greg, the city ticket is that. The freedom ticket is, I won't say it's an extension, but it's similar, where there's a niche need for a segment of the ridership population to address it either with a service or a fare issue. So it's not totally on foreign territory, because we don't do it all the time, but we have done it from time to time. Yes, absolutely.
I want to just get, if you could reemphasize just these guiding principles on why you do the fare hikes you did this time around with trying to just raise the prices by 4% instead of pulling in the revenue. I know that Bob had mentioned that the finances could take a hit by some $27 million, 29. So for the riders then, do they get a benefit out of doing it this way? And I'll let you take it from
There's
there.
been a dialogue since 2008, 2009. If you remember those first two fare increases coming out of that, we were in a terrible position. I think there was 7.5% apiece. And we were moving toward, I think the board understands, and I believe the region understands, the importance of regularly scheduled fare increase, the amount of which needs to be determined. But there are some systems that went a number of years in this country without a fare increase, and then when they had one, it was a whopping fare increase, over 20%. And the public says that's pretty hard for them to swallow. So it's the biannual fare and toll increases. Early on, we were talking about yields. Yields meaning revenue coming in the range of 4% every 2 years. But that may mean for some riders, because at some point, if you raise the fare too much, people cease to use the system. We call that elasticity. On the toll side with bridges, the elasticity is far greater than it is on the transit side. So we move toward not yields, we move toward cost increases. So we're living now within this, cost of living, every 2 years adjusted, fare and toll increases, and that's why we're saying it's 4%, approximately 2% per year.
Just to continue that thought out, why that cost and not the yield benefits the rider? You mentioned elasticity,
because if it's yield, some people are going to pay more than 4%. Because if for every 100 people, 3 people drop off, you're going to have to raise the price more than 4% to get the 4% yield in revenue. So the benefit is that we're affecting less people by saying it's a cost increase.
Can you talk about why the two plans are the same when it comes to the 30-day and 7-day increases?
Well, first of all, what we're trying to do is offer differing alternatives that we want to hear public comment on from our riders. Elected officials will weigh in as well. That's part of the process. And under the heading of fiduciary responsibility, which some people don't, and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, don't understand, the board has a responsibility to make sure it takes its actions and makes its decisions in a way that keeps the agency whole from a funding perspective. So we need to make sure all of our revenue sources, from all means, fare box, tolls, subsidies from the city and the state, reach a point where we can provide safe and reliable service and fund elements of the capital program that we need to fund. So that's the way it's constructed. The two alternatives we have generate, they're almost indistinguishable in terms of the amount of revenue they generate for the MTA. But one case, we're raising the base fare from $2.75 to $3. One case, we're decreasing the bonus. Another case, we're increasing the bonus. And we want to get the flavor of the ridership at large with respect to how it impacts them. The overwhelming majority of customers are using 7, and those that can afford it, 7 and 30 days. So those numbers drive a certain amount of revenue, and that's why they're the same on both proposals.
I know you touched upon this, but can you just tell us what riders are going to get out of this? What are you going to give riders by raising these fares?
Well, first of all, we're giving them safe and reliable service. I mean, one of the comments we made, and I think when the Chief Financial Officer went through the presentation, we actually are providing expanded service in this next 2 years. 2nd Avenue will be operating, Fulton Street's operating, 7 West is operating, so those are new and expanded services. So of the 4%, those costs are about $73, $74 million a year. 1% of a fare increase is about $70 million. So 1% of that 4% is for new and expanded services. The other 3% are for the safe and reliable service. And a lot of people say, well, I'm not getting anything for that, but I'm paying more. Yes, but our employees deserve raises, as the public does at large. So there's a 2% fare, 2% projected increased labor costs. So it's all of those factors rolled up into one. There are many things in life that the cost goes up and the product doesn't change. We're sensitive to that, and that's why we're continually taking costs out of the organization.
May I follow up? The last time you raised fares, what did riders get? Was it the same thing that you're spelling out now?
Basically, it was the safe and reliable service, the continuation of the capital program, and where we make platform changes to the budget. And what we mean by that is, if we were to provide a totally new service, a new route, a new rail, subway route, a new rail service, commuter rail service, or bus route, we got to come back to the board. But if ridership increases, and we're seeing more customers, so we got to reduce the headway on a line from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, that's an increase in service. That's part of the platform budget. And as we have seen ridership increases, we've made changes to the platform budget. So we've actually increased service within the bounds that we're allowed to do, and so those are increases in service as well.
You and Bob Ferran talked about a lot of the cost savings that come about, starting with making every dollar count and continuing through to today. But over the longer term, what is the MTA looking at for cost savings for the particularly high cost of capital projects in New York, and how does that impact fare and toll increases down the line?
One of the things the governor has been, I could say insistent on because it's true, is that we've got to deliver projects on time within budget. We do a relatively good job at that, but we have some projects that's not the case. So every time we exceed a budget, that's money that can't be spent for something else. Every time we take longer, we're impacting the customer. So, I mean, some phrases you've heard, like when we're doing work on the system, doing a station renovation, doing a track reconstruction job, get in, get done, get out. Live within scope, schedule, and budget. It's less impactful to the customers in terms of how the service gets delivered. It's less impactful to the customers in terms of what the ask we're making of them to pay for these things.
So what about the question of how New York City's capital construction costs, even for estimates that you do have and you do meet, are still much higher than other comparable cities?
Is there a comparable city to New York? I mean, I'm from the second city, won the World Series. Took a long time. I went to every home game in 1969. Not that I remember. There is no comparable city to like New York. There is no place where it's 24/7. I've lived in Chicago. It's not the same. It's a distant second city. So the cost of construction, the impacts of construction, the costs of doing work here, the amount of work that's going on and the competition for labor, because if there's a lot of work going on and there's a limited supply of labor, you will pay a premium for that labor, rightfully so. So a lot of what we do is costful because of the impact. But I also say we've got some of the highest, if not the highest reliable subway cars in the country and the best price per unit in the country, commuter rail. But we're constantly looking at those areas where we're not doing as good as norm and exceed the norm. That's what we're trying to do.
there tends to be a lot of confusion among riders on a day-to-day basis about exactly how much they're paying for a base fare. Like when they, with the bonuses and the unlimiteds and everything like that, does the MTA have any plan to do more advertising or public service announcements to try to make it clearer to what they're paying and what the best product for them should be?
If you notice the level of frustration on my face now, it's because you've hit a nerve that the board recognized the last time we did a fare and toll increase. We have reason to believe that there's a portion of our ridership population. I think the 7-day card, the weekly card, the 7-day and the 30-day, people understand value for money because it's a fixed price, and the more they ride, they know that unit cost is coming down. It's the level of the bonus, at 5.5% or 11% or it's 16%. I don't think people can actually associate what that value is. When we have the table and we say this is what the actual cost per ride is, it's not $275, it's $248. I didn't know that off the top of my head, and I work here. So if the public doesn't, if I don't, they're not going to know. So we need to be able to find a way, maybe through an app, where for a person's specific ridership behavior, for that which isn't discretionary, like if they're Monday through Friday and they need to make 5 round trips a week, we can have something for them. But there are other people that have a certain amount of their decisions are made on a discretionary basis, like I'm going to go in on Saturday, do it at drive, or I take the train. We need to be able to provide mechanisms for them to be able to get that and make the decision as to what fare instrument is better. If we're in a position that somebody doesn't buy a 7 or a 30-day card, not because they can't afford it, because they think they can't afford it, that's wrong. We got to change that.
Hi. I understand holding off on some of these social fares because of these issues of capacity, like a freedom ticket that would add riders going to Penn Station and coming back from Penn Station. But this proposal for a suburban ticket that would be intra-island on weekends, I would think that you've got the capacity to accommodate those extra riders now. Why not move on that now?
I'll try to explain this in as simple a way as possible. It may require a longer conversation. First of all, there's a significant difference between that service which is headway-based versus that service which is schedule-based. And so for discretionary users, it's a much simpler decision to say they're going to ride the subway if it's headway-driven versus out in the subway, out in the suburbs where it's schedule-driven. If there's a long time between trains, like hourly or more than that, it's hard to get those discretionary riders in because it's too inconvenient for them. But once you go below half hour, 20 minutes, and the frequency is there like it is in subways, it's a different discussion about discretionary use. So when you look at the intra-island ticket issue, you need to look not only at price, but also where would it be most beneficial. Because if you price something but the frequency of service is so low they're not going to use it, what did you accomplish? So that's why we want to study that more. I think a number of the board members talked about the fact whether you call it social fare, whether you talk about how are you maximizing the use of a transportation asset, it varies depending upon what prism you're looking through. Suburban travel, city travel, more likelihood of discretionary use for sure in the city, maybe less so, but more niche formed in the suburbs. So that, and we want to make informed decisions. I want to come back to that. It's important to make informed decisions. Because if you make an informed decision not to do something when you really can, financially and from a service perspective, that's bad. Or if you make a decision to put in a service that you really can't afford, that's just as bad as well.
Hi, Tom. We've got enough people in this city who will be able to say, I remember when the fare was fill in the blank, a nickel or whatever. So $3.
I wonder how many people are around it. There may be some, but.
Let's say that the fare does go up to $3. Sell me on that and how you get that over to the public on it still being a good deal.
Well, I'm not going to sell you on it right now because I want to hear what the public has to say. First of all, you take a look at what percentage of the riders are actually availing themselves of that fare media. If it's a very small amount, what are we losing by keeping it by keeping it at $275 versus raising it to $3? And we want to make an informed decision. So at this point in time, I'm not prepared to give you an answer at that. We are looking at it from the standpoint of trying to take care of the majority of customers we have, which are the 30-day ticket, the 7-day ticket, 7-day pass, and the paper ride with bonus.
Quick follow, but why does a fixed fare, or rather, could you compare a fixed fare to other cities that have zone fares and why that still matters here?
Well, I'm trying to figure out how to answer this question, but you'll get it when I answer it. For the very same reason that even when unification occurred and the private operators, IND was always public, but the IRT and BNT were private. They unified the system. They had a unified fare. That it was held as low as it was, as long as it was for the political perception of raising the fare. There's still some semblances of people saying that base fare is what we should be looking at. But it no longer is 80% of the riding population. It's like 1% or less. So that's part of the dynamic we have to look at.
So I have one question from me and one from Andrew Siff, who was summoned to Trump Tower. My question is, yes, just now, not by the mayor, by Trump, but
transition team member.
Yeah. So $3 is a nice round number, and I was looking at other major cities like Boston and D.C. and Chicago. They're more in the $2.25 range. Do you think we are reaching a breaking point here where, I know all the reasons for the increases every 2 years, but where riders are going to say, hitting this every 2 years and topping out over $3 is just too much?
I get the question, but I would also look at the question from a number of different places. What's the cost of their 7-day pass? What's the cost of their 30-day pass? Do they have a pass with a bonus? Because we shouldn't look at just one factor, and we certainly shouldn't just look at that base fare factor, because that's not that's the de minimis part of our riding population. It's a prism. It's a look, and we really do want to take care of the core of our constituency base in terms of ridership, because they're the ones that depend on us, use us, and sustain us.
Regarding Andrew, I bet you know what he wants to ask about. It's the 2nd Avenue subway. Oh, okay.
So it seemed like this time around there's a lot more talk about social fare policies. And I wanted to see if you could reiterate why you think that is and where it falls on MTA priorities.
There was certainly a lot of public discussion today. It's been discussed informally among board members. It's been discussed in the industry. It's now 7 years since I've been in Vancouver. Time flies when we're having fun. It was discussed when I was in Vancouver. So it's been something in the Pacific Northwest. I think Seattle has that fare. I think Portland has that fare. I'm looking for Frederica. I believe San Francisco has that fare. So I don't want to say it's bubbling up, but it's coming to the surface. David Jones has brought the issue up. There's been a discussion at the City Council, so it's the issue of how do we make sure we're addressing the needs of that part of our ridership spectrum.
So Andrew wanted to know, at what point do you need to set a date for the opening, and does New Year's Eve pose a challenge in terms of scheduling?
We do need to set a date at which time we're a go or we're not a go. And ideally, we're approaching that point. There has been a tremendous amount of focus, more so than I can ever remember, about trying to make the committed date of December 31st for a lot of good reasons. So stay tuned. We'll keep you informed. But we're approaching the date where we have to say in or out. We're going to make it or not. Second issue is I'm sure when the date was set, I think the last time the date was set was 7 years ago. People were probably looking at, let's get it done in 2016. Just so happens the last day of 2016 is December 31st. I don't know if they actually honestly thought about the fact that it's New Year's Eve. A lot of people in the world watch the ball drop on New Year's Eve, the country, the city, whatever. So it provides another set of challenges for us to meet as we open on December 31st.
Would you have contact with the NYPD? Have they expressed any concern that that would be a logistical nightmare to be having that at the same time? So maybe New Year's Eve is probably not really on the table. Maybe it'll be the 30th?
From a variety of different perspectives, we work hand in glove with NYPD, especially the Transit Bureau. So in terms of impact to the region, the security issues or concerns, which we're not going to elaborate on, all of those factors are ones we would have a coordination and communication with NYPD on.
So off topic, last evening, thousands of transit workers rallied outside of 2 Broadway, threatening to strike if the contracts aren't reached during the negotiation period. How confident are you that you'll be able to reach an agreement with the union?
I'm confident. I mean, we're always confident. I mean, there's a collective bargaining process. Sometimes we go to a hotel and we have a meeting and the union presents its demands and senior executive management sit there. Yesterday, I believe, Local 100 decided to do that yesterday here out in front of 2 Broadway. So it's the start of the collective bargaining process. And if you've been around here long enough, it's the process where both parties come to the table. They list their demands. I can tell you this, we're not starting from 3 zeros. So that's a significant difference than where it was last time. Because the economy's in much better shape, and we're in better shape.
Tom, the other day at the committee hearings, there was discussion about platform doors, and it was in the context of safety. Has anybody at MTA looked into a possible revenue aspect of it? I know some international cities have advertising on platform doors that could reclaim some of the costs and maybe even be recurring revenue.
I believe the system in Seoul, Korea came forward across when I was still president of New York City Transit. They dealt with the issue of platform doors. They're one of the few systems that put in retrofit platform doors. None of the legacy systems have. There was some kind of statement that maybe London and Paris did it. London did it on a half of the Jubilee line. They may be doing the other half, but I'm not sure. When Paris did it, it was on the new line, line 14, the Meteor line. So no legacy systems. Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, they're not doing it. There are significant challenges to it. But in the Seoul proposal, they were offsetting, if not fully funding the cost, by advertising on the panels. They came here, but they were looking more from a standpoint, this is data, this goes back years, of them choosing the stations. That's not, if you choose the stations from the standpoint of maximizing revenue, you don't necessarily have the benefit that you want for an entire line.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on my earlier question about the 30-day, 7-day cards. You seem to suggest that because the majority or a great number of riders purchase the 30-day and 7-day cards, and the concern is that if you raise the base fare too much, people will abandon the transit system. Is the idea that then the 30-day and 7-day riders are just more likely to swallow an increase, and that's why there's no need for 2 different options?
The raising of the base fare, given 1% of the ridership, doesn't spill over into the other issue. The issue is the 7-day pass in both proposals goes up 3.2%. That's less than 4. The 30-day pass goes up 3.9%. So for that core, that's some 40% of the people. I have the numbers, but we're living within that 4%. And for the 7-day, because that's in between, people that can afford the 30 and people that are buying the pay per ride, it's 3.2%, 1.6% per year.
Can we go back to the door question again, for the platforms? So I'm just a bit confused. I know you said it's very complicated, but is it something, we just had another person die, I think, overnight, because they jumped. Is it something that's at all possible, or is it just like,
10 years of my career were spent in safety. Quite a few years right here in New York City Transit. The issue of people deciding to take their life is a very serious one. You feel for the family, you feel for the individual, you feel for the employees that are affected. Give or take a certain number, the numbers are there, 60 to 70 people a year. Sometimes they're higher, sometimes they're lower. The issue of people who wind up accidentally on the right-of-way, incapacitated, have a stroke, fall. We're looking at what we call intrusion detection, a way to be able to detect the presence of a person on the guideway in a way that we can provide visual and audible alarms to people in the station and the train operator as he or she is approaching the station that they may need to use extra caution. And that's to address the issue of the accidental falls. The issue of people deciding to take their life is far more complicated because the only solution maybe, won't tell you a fully solution, is platform doors. Platform doors that are in systems where they're designed from day one with them in place, which is the majority of the systems that have them, is one thing. To put them in a system in a retrofit way, there are considerable technological challenges to be able to do that. Put aside the cost issue. The cost issue is substantial too, but the technological challenges are substantial.
Just as a follow-up on that question, I know right now that the MTA has, they station people in some of the busiest stations to make sure that, to keep the crowd under control. Is there any interest or way that there could be people in more stations to make sure if there's someone who seems, like emotionally disturbed, like they might push someone or they might jump, to try to keep, because obviously if you have, the intrusion, that's not going to stop somebody from jumping in front of a train because
Right.
they're not going to have enough time to react.
Well, platform controllers that we have at stations possibly could do that. The transit police possibly could do that. But given the number of people that we have utilizing the system, especially in the peak of the peak, it's a daunting challenge. If someone decides to take their own life, it's pretty hard, difficult to stop. And I don't want to sound callous. I really don't. This is it's a serious issue.
I believe it was Emma that was posing as Andrew Siff earlier, so now I'm in the role of Kate Hines, who wants to know what the MTA thinks of the Post-it note reaction to Trump's election in the 14th Street subway passageway. Why is this being allowed as a form of public expression but not political advertising? That's me as Kate Hines.
First of all, it happened. We weren't part of it in terms of generating or asking for it. I'm not laughing because it's funny, but one of the challenges we have with respect to the right of freedom of expression, freedom of the press, is one we're held to a different standard than other people because we're a public system and because people consider us to be part of the public at large. So as that happened, and maybe somebody organized it, it was an expression of people's emotions that how do you say no to? There's a point at which maybe you do have to say no to it, but for people to be able to express whatever their issues of concern were or frustration, that's the American way. Why would we say no to that? If it were to continue and create a disturbance at the station and it would expand to other places, we would address it, but as it stands right now, we're letting people express their interest. We're not endorsing it, we're letting it experience. If it continues, we'd have to decide how to take action.
A related question. Interested in your take in what a Donald Trump presidency means for the MTA. I know Republican administration typically wouldn't be thought of as pro-public transportation in urban areas. A lot of people think Donald Trump might be the exception, being in New York or being a big booster of infrastructure development. So could this be a good thing for the MTA?
Chairman and CEO, I look at anybody's candidacy, whether it's a city elected official, a state elected official, or a federal elected official. Do they understand the function we provide? Do they understand the importance that the MTA has to the region at large? Do they understand the importance New York has to the economy of the United States of America? Are they supportive of infrastructure? So both candidates, both primary candidates, the Democratic candidate and the Republican candidate, were very supportive. One was, and the other one is, we'll find out, of infrastructure. So from that perspective, we're excited because we have $1 trillion asset here that we need additional federal funding for.
I'd like to ask about weekend ridership. Looking at some of the numbers, I know this was discussed Monday. Ridership is just going down, and even when you do the 12-month average, you just see that goes right down. At the same time, it also has the odd effect that if you take a weekend train, it's really crowded, and overcrowding was the second biggest cause of delays in that. How do you diagnose the problem with weekend service? What do you think are its characteristics, and what, if any, plans does the MTA have to address that?
First, we verify if weekend ridership is going down. Second, we try to, if it's going down, it's going down. I'm not arguing it. I'm saying if it's going down, it's going down. Then we ascertain why is it going down. Just because ridership, that could be one of the reasons, but it may not be the only reason. The price of gasoline right now is exceptionally low. And for some families making a decision, for example, either in the outer boroughs or the region, when you're coming in with a family and you want to be able to come into an event on the weekend, that decision as to whether or not you take your car and drive and the cost of that versus taking a train is a very complicated one. So I wouldn't jump to the conclusion, that it's solely due to the increased ridership. It may be, but we need to factor that in. And what are the dynamics that are causing the reduction in ridership?
So
and then
what are they? Have you?
No, we're going to look at it. A lot of stuff we do lags because of how we get our information. I wish we could get it faster. With a new fare payment system, we will be able to get it faster, but we're going to look at all those things. But we've had some aha moments. The issue of the effect of the millennials on our ridership is an example of that. And we don't want to rush an analysis to come to an ill-formed conclusion and make an ill-formed decision.
So what is the concerns then of having a low ridership? And if you don't mind, I just want to go back to my original, sorry, I forgot the mic. To go back to my original question, not that I was saying overcrowding was the cause, it's just that ridership is down, but yet it still feels overcrowded. And just what I want to ask then to say is, are you concerned about that low ridership? Does it pose a challenge to you? Does it weigh on you? Is it something to fix?
We're always concerned about changes in ridership, whether they're up or down. Because if they're up past a certain point that we're past capacity, we're concerned. We'd love to have up to capacity. But when we're losing ridership and we're not doing our job from a sustainability standpoint, filling seats, obviously we're concerned, obviously.
I wanted to ask about fares again. There was, today it was said there would be continued study of the city ticket or freedom ticket expansion in the city. In April, the new City of New York in its One NYC update said it would work with the MTA to complete study of commuter rail fare policy prior to the scheduled 2017 fare and toll increases. So from the MTA side, does that study exist, and what's the progress on it?
I'll go back and ask staff and get you an answer. There's a number of different studies going on. In some cases, we're part of those studies, and we're touched. In other cases, we aren't. I thought the Citizens Budget Commission study on housing and its relationship with transportation was an exceptionally informative one. And I think it needs to guide some discussions with respect to what we need to do to increase the amount of affordable housing that is transit-oriented, development friendly, close to the transportation options that we have available to people. So it's a multifaceted question and a multifaceted analysis that needs to be done. But going back to the comment about, are we concerned about ridership and maximizing use of capacity? Absolutely.
So you're not aware of, a city...
At my level, I'm not, but we may or may not have been involved.
I just was hoping that you could talk a little bit more about what, if anything, the MTA is capable of doing with regard to helping low-income riders with subsidies or anything else. It seemed like there was a lot of discussion about it during the meeting, but nothing really conclusive or substantial.
I don't necessarily know if we should provide the subsidy. In some cases, we do. There's a shared responsibility for subsidy. So, like on school fares, I think at one time it was one-third, 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 one-third state, one-third city, one-third, MTA. It's in a different perspective right now because we're paying more than one-half. But I got to go back to the basic underlying issue. The most efficient form of transportation we have in our system is the subway. We only get 70 cents out of every dollar of cost out of the fare box, highest in the Western Hemisphere. On Metro North, it's about 60%. On Long Island Railroad, it's about 50%. On the bus network, it averages 40 to 45, but some are much lower than that, like express buses are heavily subsidized. So when we talk about subsidies, they're generally subsidies that are coming to us, not subsidies that we're giving someone else. So there's that issue in terms of if there is, and that's where the tough decision each and every board member has to make, and you'll look at them around the room, on the fiduciary responsibility side. Because it's not for lack of want to provide a service that is in tremendous need for somebody. It's the ability to provide that service and fund that service without affecting safety and reliability for the 6 million people that use the subway, the 2.5 million people that use the bus, and the people that use the two commuter railroads. Thank you very much.